Anyway, I slightly enjoyed playing the clarinet, and I was always ready for my first choice, the drums. Tim Burke got the bass drum, and one of the other more popular guys got the same. Well, at least I learned another instrument. We played in a couple of concerts with other bands. Our school band was too small to give a performance, so we always had to latch onto another school's band. We took a yellow school bus to another private Christian school and sat in on their rehearsal. Then, later that night, we played the concert for lots and lots of parents. That was after several rehearsal sit-ins leading up to that night. After a year or so, I grew tired of playing the wrong instrument, and I found the end of progress in me getting any better at it, so I asked about some drums. It wasn't till 8th grade that I got those drums, and when I did, I was in heaven. I still have that old clarinet, and once a year or so I pull it out and play the only tune I know on clarinet, Hava Nagila. I like how Bart Simpson sang it. Don't have a cowman, don't have a cowman, don't have a cowman, have a piece of fish, oi! It was about this time that I began to have some trouble with a fairly new student. Bobby Schwartz was this tall, skinny, tan-faced German kid who was quite a handful just to know. He was hyper every day, like he had a big bowl of Sugar Smacks and Dr. Pepper and washed it all down with an espresso before he came to school. I was his toy friend, so to speak. He would come into school in the morning and be all hyped up and run up to me and say, "Hi, Joe, ee." And he would put his hands together and dig his fingernails into my shoulder, for some reason. He did this while making this bizarre sound, ee. I guess he was just happy to have someone to hang around. His hyper nature made him somewhat less popular, but not as unpopular as the students like me. How is that? I couldn't figure that out. Bobby was also very religious, like Jimmy. But they didn't get along with each other, strangely enough. I remember thinking that they were made for each other, but Jimmy had already spent years cultivating his parasitic relationship with me. He was not about to lose his grip on my social status. What little there was. Once we were playing and I accidentally slapped Bobby's face. He got mad, but I quickly rescued the situation by saying, "Oops, but hey, don't get mad and do something to me. I'll sue." With that, he immediately backed off every time. I told him that both my parents were lawyers, which was true, but I also introduced the concept of legal action, and he seemed to understand that. It was more of a joke to me, but I found the power of clever speaking to be very tantalizing. Bobby was one of the boys who went on to become an altar boy. It was so bizarre seeing him do this because he was so tall and thin. He stuck out in church, not only for that reason, but also because in church he had to behave. It was a totally different Bobby Schwartz, it seemed. It was around this time that we were introduced to another physical aspect of the religious supernaturalism that we were involved with. One of the priests came to talk to us about the scapular. He brought enough scapulars for everyone in the class. A scapular is a relic enclosed in a tiny leather pouch on the end of an elastic band. It was a necklace that we were supposed to wear, get this, for the rest of our lives. The relic inside the pouch was a tiny piece of cloth about 3/8 of an inch by 3/8 of an inch square. It was very small, square-shaped, and bright white. That little tiny piece of white cloth was cut from a larger piece of cloth that was touched to the bones of a dead saint, or rather a very devoted priest who died long ago and was declared a saint by the Vatican. The idea behind wearing this thing was to be in physical possession of a tool that could enable anyone who wore it when they died to avoid anything other than heaven as an instant destination. As long as you were wearing the scapular when you died, you went to heaven instantly. It's like a magic ring or a powerful cape. Of course, we Catholic school students were deprived of all kinds of trendy jewelry, t-shirt designs, and other statements of individual fashion expression. So we all loved the idea of some jewelry we could all wear during school. Sure, it wasn't exactly bling, but it was ours, and it was urged on us that we should always wear it. So many of us did. I did for a few months there. Around the 5th grade, I began to take more notice of the girls in our class, especially Catherine Falk. She was the bee's knees. Slender, with straight brown hair and an amazingly cute face, she was devout, and on Sundays I'd see her and her family in church with us. I could never really talk to her, but it was just nice to see her and think about her. Catherine was smart, too. She made good grades, and that made it tough for me to talk to her. She was also popular, so I thought, forget it. I also liked to look at Jane Janicek. She was this tall, blonde girl with the face of a model. Now, she wouldn't even look at me, and would occasionally scowl whenever I would look at her. It was early, so looking and admiring were certainly good enough for me back then. Really, I was more interested in building model airplanes and simulating ground combat operations in my backyard. I really wanted to join the Army, and that attitude stuck with me until I did just that. My parents tried to get me into sports for the longest time. I was already into music, having taken a few years of piano lessons. But they bought me a football, a soccer ball, a soccer net, a baseball glove, and a few other things. Then they signed me up for Texas League Baseball. I did not enjoy that at all. To me, sports have always involved too many negatives to be worthwhile. Life was competitive enough, but to give people yet another reason to oppose their fellow classmate or neighbor or friend is just not healthy in my mind. Other people enjoy sports, that's fine. Not me, and I've been to a lot of different sporting events. Music is more of a universal concept, in that no one has to have a talent or physical size enough to enjoy music. Most good music touches people in all walks of life, even sports fans. When Gary Glitter got famous with his football anthem, he probably didn't intend for it to happen like that. Hey, he's a musician, by the way. I've always felt that music and sports are like oil and water. You can get them together, almost, and even just that is a hassle. The end result isn't a usable version of either one, oil or water, unless you're making pasta, of course. To me, religion was like this when compared to life. Every day was a struggle to satisfy the Christians around me, and we never got to hear from a God on the issue. It seemed like an important issue since it was basically my physical and intellectual slavery we're talking about here. As a child, I had not yet obtained the civil rights I needed. I cannot help but think that if Holy Ghost had been more about sports, it would have been less about religion, and perhaps that's the reason the faculty there worked hard to keep it about religion. Sports there had been kind of let down. At one time, the Holy Ghost Rams was a winning junior high level football team, and a winning volleyball team, and a winning baseball team. From the time I began there in 1975 till around 5th grade for me, 5 years later, all of those teams evaporated. The volleyball team hung on the longest and eventually made a comeback in 1982, but it didn't last. Religion seems to have been the big focus of that school, just like law is to Harvard. We had an hour of religion class per day, in addition to the praying before every class and church twice a week. That's not counting numerous additional religious situations that pervaded our school year calendar.